Thank you for joining me again tonight as we go over the Turtles of Ontario. Now, I used to have an awesome full-size poster that was, I think, 2 feet by 3 feet long with all the native species to Ontario. And I believe it was the Toronto Zoo that made that poster a while ago. And I had it in my room for years as it was a beautiful poster and showcased all the species that we have here in Ontario. But what I would like to do tonight is to just quickly go over each species that we have, explain what they look like, where you can find them, and if they're endangered, threatened, or invasive. Alright, so let's begin with one of my favorite looking turtles, and a truly classic one that you can find here in Ontario. And that would be the Blandings turtle right here in the top left-hand corner. So the Blandings turtle is a medium to large-sized turtle that can be found throughout southwestern Ontario. Their key identification characteristics are a grayish brown to black shell with yellowish flecks, a bright yellow chin, bulging eyes, and a size between 12 and 18 centimeters long. Now, I've seen them many times, and they often like hanging out on logs in wetlands or swampy areas. They're truly a very turtle-y looking turtle, if there is such a thing. They remind me of Franklin the turtle a bit. Now, the next turtle, which I think is one of the more common native species we have here in Ontario. There's a lot of snapping turtles, but we also, where I live, have a lot of Midland painted turtles. Now, these are one of the first turtles to emerge after the winter, so perfect right at this time of year. When we start having warmer days in April and May, the Midland painted turtles will start to come out and poke their heads out. On those sunny days, you can find them basking on logs in small wetlands, beaver ponds, rivers, and areas that are quite marshy. So these turtles are probably the most colorful native species we have here in Ontario. They're mottled with red markings along the edge of their shell, possessing yellow stripes on the neck and legs, and are a bit smaller than the Blandings turtle, between 11 and 14 centimeters long. Now, another species that we have in Ontario that often gets confused with the painted turtle is the red-eared slider. However, the red-eared slider is a non-native species. This means that it was introduced by humans into Ontario. Now, they are incredibly prolific breeders and have largely exploded in population numbers. This has put strain on all of the remaining native species in Ontario as they occupy the same environments but consume resources that would otherwise be given to the more endangered and native species of Ontario. So they look very similar to the painted turtles, although they have a more yellow and green shell. Their head is more green, and they have a red stripe behind each eye as opposed to along the outside of their shell. So they're slightly larger than the Midland painted turtles, being anywhere between 12 and 20 centimeters long, making them a medium to large turtle. They do have a lot more yellow markings on them than the Midland painted turtle, but when they just poke their head above water, people can get confused and mistake the two. Now, directly above that, we have the wood turtle. Now, the wood turtle is endangered, as are pretty much all of the other native species in Ontario, except for the map and the snapping turtle, and the Midland. But the wood turtle is a terrestrial species, meaning it spends the majority of its life outside of the water. And it looks, you can see here, it looks like a tortoise because it has a terrestrial lifestyle. It's not aquatic like the rest of the species in Ontario. So they have a brown shell with a ridged, wood-like texture where they get their name from. Usually found on land and are about 14 to 20 centimeters long. Now, right above that is one of the turtles that I have pretty frequently seen where I live, and that is the northern map turtle. The northern map turtle. So northern map turtles have brown shells with light yellow map markings. You can see on their back here that mottled texture. That's where they get their name from, this sort of geographic or topographical map look on the back of their shell. They also have yellow markings on the head, which are similar to that of the red-eared slider, although they are considerably larger at the high end. They have jagged edges around the shell and can be up to 27 centimeters long, which is larger than the red-eared slider. Now, in the middle here, we have the spotted turtle. Now, these are one of our smaller native species, but an absolute classic. They're gorgeous, gorgeous little turtles. They have a black shell with yellow spots all across it, going up to their neck, head, and covering the entire back part of their shell. They also are, as I said, smaller, only getting up to about 12 centimeters in length, and are, like the rest of turtles in Ontario, endangered. Right? All of the native species of turtle, except for the painted turtle, are either threatened, special concern, or endangered. So there really are no native turtle species in Ontario that aren't under some kind of threat, right? Habitat loss. Roads are a huge one, especially for the snapping turtles. And just their slow, long lifespan, right? So when humans interfere with their habitats and when they destroy population numbers, turtles are so slow to reproduce that it takes decades for populations to recover, whereas smaller, faster reproducing animals can recover much more quickly. Turtles don't have this ability. So it's very difficult for wild populations to bounce back even when we do our best to protect the remaining areas that they live in. Below the spotted turtle, we have my personal favorite, the spiny softshell. Now, I have a large breeding ground of them near my house. So I live in one of the few areas in Canada where we actually have spiny softshells, let alone Ontario. So they pretty much stay within the Carolinian zone. They don't really go any further north. So I'm in the furthest southwest part of Ontario, which is why we have them here. They're unique because, like the name would suggest, they have a soft shell. So the carapace and plastron of all the other native species is rigid and bony. So it's more like sort of harder than your fingernail, whereas the spiny softshells have a more leathery or rubbery and compressed shell. So you can see they're more like a pancake, and this leathery, smooth texture means they're incredibly fast in the water as they're highly hydrodynamic. They're also very, very easily spooked. So if they see you come to the riverbank, even if they're basking on a rock in the middle, they'll immediately dive in and swim away. They really don't like people getting too close to them, and I can't blame them for that. And they're they can get very, very big. So they are, I believe, in terms of length, the biggest native turtle we can have. Yeah, so they could be up to 43 centimeters long, and I would say that I have seen one just about probably that length. There's a large female that lives about a kilometer from my house, and yeah, she's probably 40 to 45 centimeters long, an absolute massive turtle. We've seen smaller offspring that have hatched in sort of the spring and summer months. So you get these tiny little round baby turtles, and the males and the young will have these little speckles on their back, so these little black dots on the shell, whereas when they get older and the big females, their shell is more uniform in color. But they're an adorable turtle species, and they remind me of home, and they're one of my favorites. Okay, moving on, we have the stinkpot turtle, or the musk turtle. These are a popular turtle that people keep as pets because they're very small and have easy care requirements for the most part, relative to other turtle species. Of course, the red-eared sliders are a very popular pet species, probably the most kept aquatic turtle species across the world, which is why they're so invasive in so many different places. But anyways, the musk turtles or stinkbot turtles are the smallest native species we have here. So they're between 5 and 12 centimeters long, which is quite small. They have a very highly domed shell. As you can see, they've got a very high arch. And they're very round, right, with a big head. So they're mostly an olive black color with 2 light yellow stripes on the head and spots on the neck. So they are called musk turtles because they release a foul odor, and they typically live at the bottom of rivers in sort of the substrate in the mud. And they can really bury themselves in there. Right, and then this is probably the turtle most people are familiar with, the snapping turtle. Snapping turtles are very, very common. You see them in a lot of different aquatic environments. I've seen them in bogs, swamps, rivers, beaver ponds, so many different areas. And they're the most prehistoric looking in some ways, right? So they're unique in that they don't tuck their tail in. They have quite a very long tail that hangs out of their body. Same with their head. They aren't able to fully retract the same way that other turtle species are. And typically they're not aggressive, right? I mean, any animal, if you hold them, is going to be protective of itself. But snapping turtles, as the name would suggest, are probably the most inclined to bite or lunge out at you if you're getting too close to them or handling them improperly. But the reason why snapping turtles are a special concern in Ontario is due to the fact that they have bad nesting habits in terms of they fall into ecological traps. So essentially they love the sand and gravel at the sides of roads, and this is ideal soil, loose soil for them to lay their eggs in. But this is problematic because while it's easy for them to lay their eggs, they're more likely to get hit by cars crossing the road, as are their offspring when they hatch and emerge. So they're probably one of the more common species you'll see on the side of roads, either hit or trying to cross to the other side, which is why people will often pick them up and move them to the other side. But they, ideally carefully. They're mostly uniform in color, light brown or black shell, with a very long dinosaur-like tail, up to 36 centimeters in length. So yeah, those are our native turtle species. We have, 8 native species and 1 invasive here in Ontario. It is thought that the eastern box turtle used to be native to Ontario. However, there is still conjecture about that in the scientific community. So box turtles have been found periodically in areas like Point Pelee. However, it is hypothesized that they're actually being smuggled across Lake Erie by poachers in kayaks, and that any of the turtles seen there are accidentally released from a Pennsylvania population, and none of them have successfully overwintered. So while it's possible that they did live here in the past, they're currently extirpated from the province, so we don't have them anymore, or potentially never did. So yeah, those are all our turtle species.